Hi, welcome to the Also Called podcast, where we're asking hard questions about our place in this hectic world.
Join us as we dig into the truth about who God is, possibly discovering that we are also called.
Welcome to the Also Called podcast. In today's episode, we'll meet two writers from our soon-to-be-released book, The Other Disciples. Today, we're diving into the life-changing story of a very little-known woman, Susanna, the fifth disciple from the book, written by Sabeth Kapahu, and Mary of Nazareth, our sixth follower, written by Katrina Carson.
Join us as we discover who they were, their remarkable experiences, and Susanna's generous response to her healing by Jesus, and a new way of considering Mary's yes and God's ask. We'll explore the lessons from their lives, ministries, and deep love for Jesus, and consider what their stories offer us today. Get ready for the journey into the heart of a grateful and surrendered follower. Let's get started.
Today, we're talking with you about what we learned in our conversations with the authors, and we wanted to share the highlights right from the authors' mouths. In this episode, we're diving into Susanna's generous response to Jesus and the fifth episode of our upcoming book, written by Sabeth Kapahu.
Sabeth Kapahu inspires enthusiasm in others and is dedicated to elevating the potential of every leader. As a CEO of Invited Back, a team member of Wild Leaders, Inc., and a devoted mom of four, she's passionate about building bridges across cultures through coaching, connection, and story. Raised in Olympia, Washington, Sabeth's journey has taken her across Hawaii, Costa Rica, China, Japan, England, Canada, and Oregon for mission work, education, and leadership development. Now rooted in the Hawaiian Islands with her husband William, she leads with a heart shaped by faith, a global perspective, and a calling to empower leaders across generations. So welcome, Sabeth. Could you introduce us real quickly to who Susanna is and where is she found in Scripture?
I love how beautiful and surprising Scripture is sometimes. And Susanna, we meet in the middle of Luke 8. If you read too fast, you'll miss her completely. But if we stop and sit with her for a moment, we see that this one line has kingdom-sized lessons for us. So I'm so excited for this conversation. Susanna, her whole biography is, like I said, one line. She shows up in a group surrounded by women who have been healed by Jesus and then gave to the ministry of him and his disciples traveling out of their own means.
That's amazing that you did an entire chapter out of less than a line.
So the challenge is Susanna is just kind of mentioned in half a line. So with that being said, what drew you to writing about Susanna?
I think it's that open door. Like, oh, let's discover a little bit because I really have no idea. And it was a challenge as well as an opportunity. And I'm in a season in my own life where I'm reimagining what entrepreneurship looks like, what generosity looks like, what my relationship to money looks like and why. And so when me and I had a conversation about Susanna, I was like, okay, I think this makes some sense and I can grow as I write. That's what drew me to her.
Beautiful. I pulled a quote from the fictional story that I wanted to ask you about. You said she had once thought of wealth as a tether, something that bound her to a life of expectation. Now she understood it was a tool, a means to freedom, not just for herself, but to those who had never known what it was to have a love and generosity like his. So what does this expectation mean? And then why was there freedom?
Again, there are not a lot of answers to the questions about what it meant for Susanna. So that space to think about what it means now is where this is coming from. And to think about like the wealth, depending on, again, like our relationship to money and how we were modeled that growing up and the people that we were surrounded with. For Susanna, like it should have been her security blanket, right? Like a woman's wealth was how she showed up and was secure. And Susanna like wasn't concerned about societal security anymore. And I can just imagine like that, the release of that tether. And the reality that now if we think about money as a tool for an opportunity ahead. I don't know about you or anybody listening, but money is so emotional. And that's how I grew up thinking about money. It was very emotional, and it was very tied to identity. And it was, you are what you make, right? Like that is a phrase we've heard. The big we, I don't know who I'm actually saying, but we hear it. Breaking free from that sense of security into a freedom of something that is so much bigger and so much more worth everything that she has, was a really amazing like picture. We're so tethered, right? Emotionally and physically and even spiritually to our money. And so to break free from that would be wonderful. I'm not saying I've arrived there yet.
Absolutely. We think that Susanna was of Jewish origin or maybe Greek. Do we know?
So her name does have Hebrew origins, and it means lily, which is just beautiful to think about. I'm going to butcher her name. Sorry, Dr. B. My Hebrew teacher, Shoshana is how you would say it. But was Susanna Hebrew? No, she was Galilean, which is a detail that I love, that I feel like matters. So she's listed alongside, again, Mary Magdalene and Joanna, and she's in this inner circle with the close people that are traveling with Jesus. And again, Dr. Cynthia Long Westfall's work highlights how often the contributions of women and those on the social margins are overlooked in biblical interpretation. But Susanna is Galilean signals that even within Jesus's closest community, there are not just the culturally elite of Judea, but there are, in fact, individuals and women from Galilee, which is a region that is considered to be on the margins of Jewish religious power. They were often stereotyped by Judeans as less sophisticated, less pure in their practice, like a culturally mixed because of the Gentile presence in the region. So to have a Galilean woman in Jesus's inner circle is saying something. This radical inclusivity of his ministry, right? Not just male, not just Hebrew, not just Jerusalem-centered leaders, but women from Galilee, doubly marginalized by gender and geography. And Jesus entrusted them with presence and resources and witness. So her Galilean identity underscores this gospel recentering, which is just so beautiful. So I love that question. This Galilean woman, a one line that we learned so much from.
My question is, you say on page 85, in a culture where sickness and spiritual oppression often led to isolation, shame, economic vulnerability, Jesus' healing of her was not just an act of mercy, it was a revolutionary reversal of her reality. So, like you said, what changed for her? Can you kind of go into later on in that same page about Jesus speaking more about money and possessions than almost anything else? And what did that invite her into?
We see Jesus and we hear about him talking about the money and possessions. And it's also very connected to our hearts and the posture from which we use our money and possessions. Like we talk about in the book that like roughly half of his recorded teachings address this. And again, not because he was concerned about the money, I think, but he was concerned about the condition of our heart. And again, it goes back to that we have been taught certain things and we believe certain things about who we are and what we can do, sometimes based on what we have. And I think that is what the radical shift was for Susanna and for us as we think about what we've been given to steward, it's actually not our identity. It's a gift and a tool that we've been given to impact the kingdom with. And so if it becomes something that wasn't ours in the first place, then we see this opportunity as so much bigger than ourselves. And I love to imagine that about Susanna and the way that she gave of her resources. All of a sudden, it wasn't about this is mine and this is how I'm going to survive. It was, this is a gift and I get to use it to expand something and a story and a ministry and a culture changing, life changing message. That's what I'd like to imagine that she was giving into. And I think we learn about the way that Jesus talked about money, and it kind of puts us into either, Andrea, you mentioned like a poverty mindset or we hear like the prosperity gospel. I guess we've heard that, right? And I think either way, whether you're thinking about money so much because you have it, you could also be thinking about money so much because you don't. And if you're always thinking about it, it's consuming your mind and heart. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to tell us, like in renewing our mind and the reality of it being a daily necessity to recenter, like, why am I doing what I'm doing today?
Well, that's perfect. Going into like the heart of stewardship you talk about in the chapter is what Jesus calls the light of our eyes. Can you explain that real quick and the whole idea of generosity?
Yeah, so that I love that what we are focusing on, like what our gaze is turned to, is what is being let into our heart. And it's, again, I think it gets lost in translation a lot, the connection between what we see and hear and think and feel, and like how we live and breathe and move out of that, and how we follow Jesus through it. And so I think the idea of, if we're focused on the monetary gain or loss of whatever is in front of us, that is how we are perceiving this opportunity. It doesn't become about the person anymore. You lose the thing that is in front of you to give and steward and love, but we see it as an opportunity for gain or loss. And I think, and you have to be healed from the brokenness before you can give it, before you can give any healing and joy and of what you've been given.
I love that. And I love just what you had said earlier, that it's a gift that we've already been given. What are we going to do with it? And I love that you defined it. It's not just the money, it's the time, the energy, the love, the attention. It's whatever we have that we can offer to somebody else. And I love that. It's a beautiful definition. One question to her healing, steward of her money and being generous with her money. We technically can say that she is a disciple. So I like what you said on page 83. It's Susanna has a kind of discipleship that was deeply engaged and sacrificial. Her name is recorded because that her faith had an impact. So let's look at it from Susanna and from Sabeth's perspective. What does it mean to be a disciple then? And what does it mean to be a disciple now?
It's faithfulness. I keep thinking of this word faithfulness, right? It's not about like numbers, even though we're talking about numbers. Like, it's not about being famous, it's about faithfulness. And we see that in Susanna, because even though it was her name and this one phrase about the character of, really, right, because she's like giving from what she had, but it was engaged again, like she was with Jesus and the disciples and traveled with them. So she dropped everything that she had. And it's not that all of us need to drop everything we have and go, but it's a reorienting, I think, like a reorienting of our hearts and minds from like outcomes to obedience. And it's a quiet, I was just with an amazing group of women over the weekend, and we talked about quiet obedience multiplies kingdom influence. And I see that in Susanna. quiet obedience multiplies kingdom influence. And I think that's the hardest part about being a disciple, the things that feel so unseen. And that even that work, like with the counselor, does anybody else know how hard this is to renew my mind, to not judge myself and others based on the numbers I see, and to not tell myself all the stories? Like, that's what the numbers were to me at first. Like when I would be working with a financial coach, I'd be afraid of those numbers because of the stories I made up about what they meant about who I was. And so, like, as a disciple of Jesus, we get to hear his voice in our head about who he says we are, not what the numbers tell us we are. But that is hard work. And that is like a daily engagement, what he's doing versus what the world is telling us we should be doing. And I think that's how I like to picture Susanna. Like, she was just in it. Like, whatever was happening, just get me at the feet of Jesus. And I have some things. You need some blankets here. Like, it's cold. I got you.
So, Sabeth, is there anything that you wanted to dive a little bit deeper into in your chapter that we haven't gotten to yet?
This idea of success and this idea of measuring. And I know we've been talking about numbers a lot, but when we look at entrepreneurship now, and we find ourselves having to value our own calling, I think it's very hard for us who have grown up in the church to put a price on our time. And I just had this thought as I was driving the other day, like, our capital is in our calendar. And I was thinking, oh, like, we talk about you need capital for a startup. And then I was thinking about how scheduled our lives become, whether it's we're scheduling our own or our kids or our families or our coworkers. And that is the capital that we give from. Our calendar, our time, our energy, our effort. As we talk about stewardship and as we talk about like holding in our hands the things that God has given us, it would be good for us to remember that we have to protect our calendars as well so that we can be well enough to steward the healing we've been given. How many times I have said, okay, God, thanks for the healing. Let me run it all out in a week because I am needed and I need to be at this meeting and that meeting. And then I find myself like mad at everybody in my world. Like, wait a minute, my heart is not really where it should be. But then we can cover it up with the next meeting. And it's really tempting to do that. And so there's a lot to navigate to think about generosity and stewardship. And there's a lot of emotion involved and a lot of, again, going back to like, we've been conditioned to like value ourselves based on what we see and what we measure. And Andrea, even I was thinking you were saying, even we use words like, a little prayer, but that prayer is echoing in heaven. I was with that group of women this weekend and we were talking about like heaven keeps way better records than any CRM, any social media, any Excel ever could. We don't think about those records really, right? And so it's a daily, right? And
so as you think about your chapter, what do you want a reader or our listeners, what do you want their takeaway to be? How do you see this applying to their lives?
There is incredible freedom when we untether ourselves from the expectations that we have created for ourselves or that others have created for us unintentionally around what we have to offer and what we can give. And my hope is that as readers get to imagine themselves in Susanna's story, that we hold a little more loosely probably the lies that we've told ourselves for so long about what those numbers mean. And then see that God has given us all that we have, and how do we get to be generous, not just because we know we should, because I've heard, that I'm supposed to be generous and I'm supposed to give this amount of money, but because we're like surrendered and obedient and courageous in those moments. That's my hope. And the reminder that it's a daily.
I love
About Susanna again is her whole biography was her name, and that she gave out of her own means, not a book deal. Like, she didn't have a Matthew, Mark, Luke, John book. She didn't have a sermon that she preached that we know of, but her faithfulness is still echoing in our journeys 2,000 years later. And so the reminder to us today that she gave radically because she was healed. So she gave to the one who made her whole is such a beautiful picture of what we get to do also.
As we continue, let's examine some of the generous people God supplied Mary of Nazareth when he asked her to take on the overwhelming task of mothering the Son of God, from the highlights reel of the sixth disciple from our upcoming book, written by Katrina Carson.
Katrina Carson is passionate about helping women navigate life's transition with faith, confidence, and purpose. As the founder of a unique perspective, she empowers others to tap into their God-given self-worth as they begin their next life chapter. From leading youth ministries and after-school programs to mentoring women and managing everyday life, Katrina has always held space for others to grow, heal, and reconnect with God's voice. Her background in church leadership, spiritual formation, and practical discipleship gives her work a unique blend of soul and structure. She lives in Florida with her incredible husband and two fierce, lively daughters.
Yeah, so Mary, as she is found in all four Gospels, a lot of the beginning part of her being chosen are in like Matthew and Luke, kind of showing different sides of that in context of her story, not just her being chosen, but like what's happening before she got chosen and people around her. And so it kind of really gives a cool 360 view of the whole situation, which I feel like is really rare in a lot of historical accounts in scripture. So we are very lucky to have that for her. Like, I'm kind of a nerd. I like to see the whole picture. I love crime shows and all this kind of stuff. Like, I want to know what everyone's doing. I want to hear all the perspectives. She's a teenager. She's young and she has everything going for her in her life and a great bride to be, good suitor. And then everything just kind of, in our world would say, blew up or turned upside down. We just get to see how everything unfolds in such a beautiful way and how God just has his hand on everything in the journey. She is found in all four Gospels. The whole story of Mary isn't in all of them, but parts of her story are in all of them. And then she's again in Acts near at the end when talking about the cross. She's mentioned there as well.
What did you enjoy most about writing, and what did you relate to most in Mary's story?
I would say probably that it's been a process. It's not just a one-time, one and done. And that her community changed as she traveled and moved to different parts of her season. I think God's done that with my journey. We've moved to different cities on God leaps here and faith leaps here, faith leaps there, and some places I never thought I would go because I don't like cold and I lived in Chicago for 6 years. And so very nice to be in Florida now. But with every leap, he brought a new community, a new people, and a new layer. And I saw that in her story, and it was very encouraging.
Who did you learn she is through this?
I learned she was a lot tougher than what I first gave her credit for. I always knew it was like really cool to say yes, but I thought of it when I was younger as more like this excitement thing, like, ooh, I got picked from God, like as if something she would always want to be doing. I just learned that there's strength. There's like a quiet strength about her. And I think I've always seen myself as being like this fierce, strong, like I can do all things. So it was kind of out there for everyone to see. But I think for her, it was just this quiet inner strength that was just like a quiet respect that it was just like felt instead of just verbally always heard.
Katrina, tell us a little bit about what Mary's issue was.
Her issue was overcoming fear and anxiety, because like you said, it was not just that her life turned upside down, it could have been a death sentence for her to choose to trust God and say yes and be honest. She, in her overwhelm, just like, okay, I'm going to trust God with this. I'm going to go to this, my cousin, Elizabeth, and I'm just going to figure this out. And then she was able to come to Joseph like in a calmer state. And it did show his character, just to be able to care for her and her situation. And he could have divorced her, and it could have been, she probably would have had a little bit more shame than him because she was the one that was pregnant. I think I wrote in later that the overcoming of fear and anxiety with God is helps through community. And Joseph Elizabeth's her first community. That's who she goes to first, her first safe place. But Joseph, that bond was her second community, like that safe place to be able to come together and share that burden. Because now he was going to get flack, like you said, that he wouldn't have gotten before. It was such a beautiful picture of this like complete family of trust and how deep that goes. It was more at that point than just a marriage contract. Like they were married, like in their souls, and that was really beautiful.
So, Katrina, tell us about Mary's response to Jesus.
I think her responses are the tangible milestones of her journey, right? Like she ponders and thinks, and then she stands firmly on and acts on what she pondered and how she reflects who God is and what he's done in her life. And she remembers and she teaches. I didn't even go over that. I mean, she discipled, I kind of like that's under like the part of the chapter where is she a disciple? It's like, yes, like she teaches, but she doesn't just teach with words. She teaches with her action and her life and her experiences. And so it's just with every new layer, God proves who he is over and over again, provides her with someone to go be close with, provides her a way to use an experience to help someone else. At the end of it all, when he's at the cross, like she's seen by her son, the Lord of Lords and Saviors, and to be taken care of. And it's just like, what a beautiful, just full picture of like, that's a parallel of like God saying like, thank you. Well done, faithful servant. Before she's done with everything, like she was done with that job, like that, because he was no longer there. Like when they say when you get to heaven, like we just want to hear good and well done, faithful servant, because our jobs are done. Like we've reached who we've wanted to reach. But that was her first big assignment, and he was going to be gone for a minute, but not on earth with her anymore. And that I felt like that was God saying good and faithful servant. And that was her, okay, I trusted him and he's taking care of me. Like I've taken care of him. He's taking care of me. And now like we can keep going forward and explain to everyone who he is and be an open book of what all that meant.
So is there anything that you want to cover that you didn't really have an opportunity to? Because like you mentioned, we only had so much space for writing our chapter.
I don't want people to look over that she didn't do it alone. She did. She trusted and had to make decisions on her own in a lot of ways. And she had to choose for herself what she had to believe. Like that is something that only you can do as a person. The ability to do that and get past your fears and anxieties about things is to take actions on the trust. Like the obedience and trust kind of go hand in hand. I think we touch on that a little bit in the chapter. Like the obedience is the action on the trust that you have to have in the faith. That is something that is for you, but the encouragement we need is also from the people around us, and not just anyone. Jesus, we're surrounded by everyone and also feel isolated. That's what made the Instagram post so fitting for this story of like the fictional part, right? We are more connected and more isolated at the same time than we have ever been before. That was Mary's case in her whole journey. There was something she was keeping close to the chest that she knew not everyone would understand. And as more and more came out, she can be more out there with it. But she stayed true to who she was and who God was. But just there was a few trusted people all along the way that God had for her. What I would want people to get from her story is to seek that and to see that. I feel like in our society, we put people on pedestals, like, look how great this person did, or look at the great things they did. And they forget that it took a village to do that. It doesn't need to be a whole glam squad of people. Man, you just need like that one good person We say it in our house a lot, like, and when we've done ministry, Jesus had 12. He helped millions, but he had 12. And then in that he had 3, and in that he had 1. And then he had his alone time. And I was like, that is such an amazing model of what we can strive for, because we could only take in so much opinions anyway, true opinions. Mary demonstrated that in her life as well. She had Elizabeth and she had Joseph. And in that time where she lost Joseph, losing him when he was 12, the wedding miracle, like, she lost her husband at that point, but she had the respect of people to listen to what she would say, which is a long way from being shamed and shunned. There was someone in that season that was with her to help her get back on her feet and make sure she was who she was supposed to be. That doesn't happen by herself.
Yeah, I love that. And you touched on something that is kind of in the heart of why we have this also called podcast, is because the access to information isn't truth. What we see on social media, we have constant interaction, but that's not really connection. I love that you touched on one of the core things that we want to address. We want to build that safe space so that people can ask those hard questions and have a true connection.
It was very inspiring to write and read and learn so much about her. I think for me, as someone who prided themselves on being the against stereotype of all the things I would never want to do and stuff, man, God is a God of vulnerability and love. And I think I used to see that as something I didn't want to do because of the whole stereotypes of like, well, girls are just emotional and they just cry all the time and they're so sensitive. And I think I just kind of made myself numb to a lot of that as I grew up. I was just like, I'm just not going to be that person. Like, I'm not going to be that kind of female. But as I've gotten older and even seeing the story of Mary and the journey, the strength in the vulnerability and the strength and power that love actually like does conquer all. And it's a lot of different levels of love, a lot of different kinds, but building bridges versus burning bridges, the power of forgiveness and healing. It's not about them changing to have you heal. It's about not giving that power. Jesus died and for all of that and conquered all of that for us to live free, but we can't live free if we're holding on to that bitterness and unforgiveness. And Mary had a lot of opportunity to have bitterness and hatred and unforgiveness really detour her permission from God. Good old mama bear stuff that no one would judge her for, like in our society. But she chose love, forgiveness, and just that quiet confidence of she's not giving that power, and she's gonna stick on course and find the people that are gonna champion that with her and encourage her. You're gonna get what you seek. And if you're seeking for a reason to hate and to be isolated and have that be your community, you're going to find people for that, because that's what our world is. And that's why Jesus came to die. But if you're seeking those who are speaking life, who are wanting to come join you arm in arm, build the bridges, do the crazy God dream and crazy mission, there are all those people too. And I think as females, we want to do it like all the men. And we just forget the power we have of being female. And just, God sees us and he values us, which is the point of this whole book. Mary saw the other women and saw them and valued them along her journey.
Going back to the God piece, we have to see that he provides the community and not disdain the small beginnings of, well, it's not what I thought it would look like. They're not my type. They're not my vibe, or, whatever. Because I look at a lot of the most important relationships that I have in my life, and it would have been easily dismissed or easily judged them as being something and not having given it the time to grow the relationship. And the same vice versa. I think there's a lot of assumptions about who I am, but God is so gracious that he gives us the people that we're going to need in our lives in certain seasons. And some we're blessed to be 20 years down the road into the relationship and still friends, even though we are as different as night and day. But again, I love that you recognize that it's God who provides that community, and it may be different than what we think, but it becomes important to us and it shapes shapes us as much as we shape it. And then I think the other thing that I love that you covered was just his faithfulness to recognize he put a big ask on her. I mean, a really big ask. And there were a lot of consequences of that ask. And he was so faithful in the Son of Man part of who Jesus is to have this child walk her through being his mother. And he was faithful in that. He was faithful in bringing her community. He was faithful in just getting her to the next step. So I just really think about in Mary's story, how much of it was even her and how much of it was God already providing the need so that she could get to the next scene, the next journey, the next, situation with Jesus, and how much he does that for us. I know in this project it's been overwhelming and I didn't know how to do 75% of it, but I just fell my way forward because God provided someone who, I know how to do that. I know how to edit. I know how to turn that document into a 300 DPI for your publishing, and he provided that whole way, and he's so faithful to do that. So I love that you recognize that when you were writing this chapter about who he is and what he does for all of us, not just the special people like Mary or Elizabeth. It's the everyday, every one of us that he does that.
Well, and I think that's the point too. All of these people were ordinary people. We make them extraordinary, but they're ordinary. And that's what I hope people, when they read our book, is that these are ordinary women going through ordinary problems, and they just had an unwavering, they took that independent, stubborn streak that we all love about ourselves, and they just like put blinders on like a racehorse and just put it to God and just took that stubbornness and used it for good. We are all ordinary. Or we can sing it as we're all extraordinary because we're all made in the image of God, right? The world tells us we're ordinary.
What we covered in church yesterday, because Katrina and I go to the same church, the C.S. Lewis quote is, "You have never met a mere mortal." Mm-hmm. Every single one of us is a being created in the image of God with a calling, with a purpose.
And we have what Mary and Elizabeth have. Like once we accept Jesus in our heart, we have that spirit in us helping us along the way, sometimes hour by hour or minute by minute, even sometimes. And sometimes it's like once a day, or whatnot, depending on our spiritual strength of the day. But we have what they have. And I think people either forget or they're just not taught it in that way. And they just think, I can't do that. I'm not strong enough. Like, that's the whole point. I mean, we're not strong enough. And I think that was what I learned about God in this process. Like, the whole point is that we're not strong enough. That's where the strength and the vulnerability and the love and to be able to forgive comes in. He just outlines that so beautifully with her. And she was a mom to her own other son, too. I can't imagine the mental game of, like, I have the Son of Man, but I have mine. How to balance and not compare and all of that stuff. I mean, so there's a lot of anxiety in her life that she probably had to go and give every minute of every day.
So how, Katrina, do you see her story applying to our audience? And what is a practical takeaway?
One of the biggest takeaways I got was her faithfulness and trust and the community aspect. And in any season of your life, if you can focus on trusting God, there will be seasons it might feel like you and God against the world, but he will always provide at least one person to help you through that. Now, we have to be open to seek that and willing to take it from that person. And like you said, Mia, that might not be someone we thought it would be or that we want it to be, maybe even in some ways. If the person hearing this today is the high schooler whose mom is driving them insane because they know she's right, but they don't want to admit that. And so they don't want to act on it because that would be admitting their mom is right. Or someone else, please, with everything in my heart, hear me that their guidance is there for love. And if you don't want to do them, find someone who is echoing the things that you know are right, because that will change the trajectory of your life. Community is so important. The right community is what is so important. High school is hard. College is hard. But in the end, it's going to be, you're shaping, those are just shaping who you want to become. So surround your people with who you want to become after those stages, and those stages will come sooner.
Thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Susanna and Mary. So drop us a line in the comments, or for a larger conversation, join us on social media. Our links are all in the show notes below. Is there someone who would be blessed by Susanna or Mary's stories or the discussion? Take a moment to share it with her.
Join us next time as we dive into the women disciples we explore in our soon-to-be-released book, The Other Disciples, with a woman who needed to learn the better thing, Martha of Bethany, and with Martha's sister, a woman who struggled with her disappointment, Mary of Bethany. And remember, stay curious and keep seeking.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Also Called provides a space for honest conversations about the truth of who God is, who we are, and the relationships He wants us to have with Him, each other, the church, and ourselves. This episode was just the start of the conversation. Be sure to check the show notes for extra resources to go further. You can also find our social media sites to join the discussion. Don't miss our next chat by subscribing to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also Called is part of Bible and Pop Culture, a crowd-funded nonprofit that allows us to provide our content to start great conversations for free. You can help us keep doing this by checking out BibleandPopCulture.com or AlsoCalled.org's Donate Subscribe buttons with a one-time gift, supporting us monthly, or sharing us with someone who might like the conversation. Thank you for being a part, and see you next conversation.